Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we have another preview video for the upcoming The Furious Wild DLC for Total War 3 Kingdoms, and today we'll be taking a look at the reforms for the southern tribes. So we're here on the campaign selection screen because I want to make note of something for the 4 playable southern tribes, and that is each of them have a different specialty in terms of reforms. So for Meng Huo, who is the all-around player, you have a balanced court that allows you to have access to all reforms with a small overall research bonus. If we switch over to King Mu Lu, we see that he has a focus on economic reforms and he can gain those reforms a bit faster. And for Sha Mo Ke, you have a specialty for political reforms and you'll gain those faster. And lastly, if you are Lady Zhurong, then you gain military reforms faster. So that is a key difference. And inside the reform tree or reform tablet for the southern tribes, we'll notice more of this in play. So for the sake of our overview here, we're going to use Meng Huo, who has a very balanced approach to all reform areas. And let's jump in and take a look at his reform tablet. Alrighty, so we're loaded up into the game and we have the reform tablet open. I'm going to call this a tablet. It's a stone carving. And we can see it's divided into 3 zones by these vines. And this first zone will have what's called the economic reforms, and they're labeled as such. You can see Nanman Economic. In the middle here, we have Nanman Military, and on the right, we have Nanman Politics. So that's why we have the 3 different faction leaders specializing in one of these 3 sections of the tablet. So if you're playing as King Mu Lu, you have a specialty in economics. If you're playing as Lady Zhurong, you have a specialty in military. And you're playing as Sha Mo Ke, you have a specialty in politics. So what does this mean when you have a specialty? Well, notice down here, we have a role on all 3 areas that have these symbols on the reform. And we can see it says, this technology will be locked until you unite all the tribes. So basically, we can only have access to the first 2 tiers here until we unite all 19 tribes and gain fealty from everyone. These will all remain locked. If you play as any of the other factions, let's say we're playing as Lady Zhurong, who specializes in military, she will have the same section here that has a lock on the 3rd tier, but her economic and political reforms will be actually locked on the 2nd tier. So it will look like a bunch of locks here, a bunch of locks here, and then a bunch of locks here in her specialty. So Meng Huo here has a little bit of bonus in that all 3 areas extend to tier 2 before they become locked by the requirement for you to unite all your tribes. So each of the other 3 faction leaders will only have access to tier 2 for one of the 3 areas. So that is a key difference. But for those 3 faction leaders, because they specialize in one thing, they get their reforms a bit faster. So they get extra bonus research rate for their specialization. It's not that much faster, probably a few turns of savings on each one, maybe 1 or 2 at most. So it's not a big deal, but it does help. And it does help differentiate between the faction leaders. Meng Huo, on the other hand, has a small boost to all 3. So that's about it. But this reform tablet here is actually much more complex because we have what's called decision lines in here. Basically, within each area, you have 2 separate lines here that are mutually exclusive. But they're not mutually exclusive in the sense where you pick the first one here, you can only pick the rest of this line. As you can see the symbol, they're only mutually exclusive in between each pair. So out of the first 3 pair here, you can mix and match. But the one side that you pick 2 of, represented by the 2 dots on the bottom, that enables you to unlock the 4th and final one, which is really, really strong. So whichever one you pick 2 or 3 of, that's the side you can finish on for that line. And another thing to note, if you're paying attention to the economic descriptions on the right, is that the building chains are divided in mutually exclusive reform lines. So if you go down one line, you have access to one set of buildings, and if you go on the other line, you have access to another entirely different set of buildings. So the buildings for Nanman factions are very, very linear based on your reform, which is why I kind of shuffled around the schedules to do the reforms first, because it wouldn't make sense to cover the buildings before we talked about this factor right here. And some of the other things you might note here is that this covers all building colors except for blue. And the blue buildings are unlocked here in a mutually exclusive choice. But you see one of the yellow buildings also attached in terms of tier 3 upgrades. So let's say I pick this one because I want the blue buildings, but then I pick the circle ones on this side earlier and I end up with this. Well, I'm out of luck, because the yellow tier 4 and 5 unlock here does not give me the level 3 unlock for free. So I'll actually be stuck with a level 2 version of the yellow building from this set and a level 3 version from this set. So it's going to be very interesting to strategize your buildings around this. And this is only the main settlement buildings. County buildings are still all available for all the Nanman factions, and there's no exclusivity. You can get all your counties upgraded except for one, and that's the horse pasture, which is all the way in the north. So I don't think you need to worry too much about it, because the theme of the economic focus is kind of a choice between being slightly more Han building focus, less primitive buildings. We can take a look at what I mean by that. For example, from the industry branch, we have something that's called Architect Guild and Artisan District, versus the option here, which is Professional Smithing and Artisan Guild as well. So there's a little bit of interesting naming going on, district versus guild. But the building chain itself, if we come to the first one, it'll describe it for us. What we have is the laborer building chain. And on this side, we have the artisan craft building chain. So craft is slightly more, I don't want to say primitive, but you actually get the feeling that they're going for the primitive feel when designing the Nanman factions. And whether that's correct or not, it's hard to say. But if you also pay attention to the reform timer, this reform on your tier 1 takes 10 turns. These take 5, 10, 9, 13, 13, 17, and 19. So I think they're implying a lot of primitive factors involved here by making it so difficult for you to get your reforms out. So these numbers are also diluted because we have 110% starting, so I'm guessing this is a 20 at the base tier. But none of the factions start out at 100 exactly, so 19 is fine. It's practically 19, and it can go down. You can actually build buildings to gain research rate, like most factions with research rate. We can take a look at one of them now, a little teaser for our building guide or overview tomorrow. You get 6% research rate at the tier 5 building, which once again reinforce the fact that we are primitive and struggle with our technology in terms of advancement. So that kind of summarizes most of the things inside the economic part of the tablet. I'm not going to go through each one. This is not a guide. This is just a simple overview before launch to talk about some of the mechanics. And now we'll focus on the military one. Here's where the choices also get very interesting. So the left side, the squares, you're going to notice a theme. It's going to be very Han focused. It's almost like you're adapting your culture to the Han. And we have two symbols here that represent unit unlocks. And what do they unlock? They unlock Han units. So the mercenary units that's famous for the Sun clan, or the mercenaries of the south, are available to Nanman factions in limited quantities if you decide to unlock this reform here called Southern Hirelings. And you get 4 units of the cavalry, which is amazing, 2 units of the infantry, which is fine because you have plenty of good infantry to compete with these guys, and 4 units of the archers. And you don't actually have a lot of archers, you have a lot of other range alternative. We're talking about axe throwers, blow darts, javelins. You do have some fire archers, but that's about it. So getting some mercenary archers will definitely help you out. And you get discounts for recruiting cost with these mercenaries, which will be helpful because you can always recruit mercenaries, use them, and then disband them. Very efficient way to never pay upkeep. And that's one option. And it will unlock a tier 3 animal tamer. So basically they're implying the Nanman people does not know how to tame horses, and if you don't learn the Han version of this reform, you'll never learn how to tame horses, at least not tier 3 horses. And then you also can't upgrade your horse pastures past tier 4. So perhaps if you're going for a long campaign where you want to paint the map, this might be the way to go, because there is a lot of value in getting horses from Legendary Animal Tamer, and horse pastures not bad either. But let's look at what we're missing out on. What we're missing out on for the alternative is a more focus on your primitive side by giving you extra recruitment slots for Southern Elephants, Nanzhong Elephants, and Tiger Slingers. So basically all the special animal units. So animal units have limits to them in terms of how many you can recruit, and you can increase this through reforms, through faction specializations. For example, if you're playing as King Mulu, then you have access to more animals, or you can build buildings. And it's pretty fair. Both versions of the military building will increase all the animal slots by 1. So no matter which choice you go with, you always can increase your animals by building the military building in your commanderies. And given the fact that buildings are so linear in choice, you're almost always going to build one building of every color in all your commanderies, unless you want to keep some level 2 buildings. Because if you think about it, if you have 6 building slots in a max building, you're stuck with building 5 level 5 buildings, 1 of each color, depending on which side you picked, and then 1 level 2 building from the other side. And if you're lucky, maybe 1 level 3 building because you picked up, one of the other sides. Let's say we picked up these 2 circle and this square, and we'll be able to gain access to level 3 versions of these 2 buildings, and we can actually extend our elephant recruitment by 1 extra because we have this, and that's a full build. So building is going to be quite weird for the Nanman factions, and it's not just restrictive on Nanman land. Nanman land restricts what you can build for the settlement, but the buildings are technologies that carry with our playing culture. So if we're playing as Nanman, even if we go conquer a Han territory, the buildings that we can construct are only our buildings. We can't construct a state workshop. But if they left a state workshop there, we can keep it. We don't have to convert that. We don't have to demolish that. So it works quite similarly to Yellow Turbans. And that pretty much summarizes the choices here for the military branch. The other bonuses are pretty typical: recruitment cost discounts, redeployment cost discounts, replenishment, some extra unit recruitment limit, replenishment, typical stuff you expect from military focus. And at the very bottom, if you go down the Han route all the way, you get the level 5 horse pasture, you get access to some very nice cavalry units, since you don't have access to cavalry, but once you mastered it from cavalry contracts, you'll be able to recruit them. And you can also get higher starting rank on these cavalry. And it's kind of interesting they give you this +3 starting rank for melee cavalry recruit, when in fact you don't have access to melee cavalry recruits. I kind of want to report this because I checked out the whole thing. There are no melee cavalry that we can recruit. You get a shock cavalry here, you get 2 range cavalry and 1 more shock cavalry. So I don't know why we would even get this. Why not give us something else? So maybe they'll fix this before launch. Everything is a beta build, like I said. There's some upkeep discount that can combo with the horse pastures for an even greater discount. I believe they're 10% now for upkeep. So in total, if we have all 4, that's 40% plus 20, that's 60. And this is maybe slightly ahistorical. I mean, in the Romance of Three Kingdom version, they never describe the Nanman people of using horses. So if you're using that as a source, it's true. But we know that horses actually existed in this region, and because the Shu Kingdom had a very shortage of horse assets, they didn't control the northwest, so they actually imported some horses from this region. So they are horses here. Maybe the tribes didn't use them, but shouldn't be that we don't know horses and have to go learn it from the Han faction. Now, of course, if you abandon that entirely and go focused on your Nanman roots, perhaps, you get a lot more elephants and a lot more tigers. And you get redeployment cost discounts, 45%, which is huge. All your retinues will be more expensive, which is interesting choice here. And you get extra armies and other bonuses. And the one that's shared in the middle here unlocks tool makers, which is also a bit interesting. I don't know exactly what the logic behind this is. Why couldn't they just have fitted it in here? It would have worked just as well, but sure. So we get retinue upkeep discount. So these two will cancel each other out in a sense. A lot of replenishment on this side. So you can actually get pretty good faction-wide replenishment as the Nanman factions, because we noticed there's 15 here, and I believe we bumped into at least 2 5s. Well, here's another 10%, and there's another 5% here. So we're talking about, is there another 15 over here? No, 15 up here and then 15 down here. 30% base from just the reform here. But obviously, reforms take a long time, as we mentioned. You need to actually work hard to get your reform quicker in terms of getting higher research rate. There are missions, I know for a fact, that will give you a pretty big boost of research rate early on. But I don't know if you're going to keep getting those missions, but that would help. Another thing going on is our political area, and once again it's divided, and this reform line will give us access to vassals, coalition, and alliances, so more diplomatic approaches. And this reform line gives us access to mercenary contract, new unique foreign assignments, and bonus to character satisfaction. Also play into the playstyle, both will give you access to diplomatic deals with non-Nanman factions. Both will allow you to trade with them. But this side will allow you to vassalize them, to form coalitions, to form alliances. While this side will allow you to get mercenary contracts. And there's some very interesting bonuses at the final tier. For example, here, at the start of each turn, for every faction you have any treaty with, you'll gain visibility over a region containing one of their armies at random. I don't know how this is useful, but it's a very new game mechanic, and it could add to the spy mechanic in the future for other factions. It's nice to see this. I don't know how practical or useful this will be, but we'll see. And then some other ones are things if you want to know is that for each one you improve your relationship with the Han Empire. Both of these are diplomatic lines, and they share a lot of the same ones. Like both of these will unlock the diplomatic option to vassalize non-Nanman factions, which you think, didn't this line say they can vassalize? No, the key difference is this can coalition and alliance. That's the key difference. As you can see, the second part of this reform here allows you to form coalition and alliances with non-Nanman factions, while on this side gives you mercenary contracts. So that's the key difference here. A lot of the details are same. You get different types of assignment. This one's a personal assignment you can use on your own faction settlements. And here we can use two called harass enemy and sabotage infrastructure, which we can use on foreign settlements. So I'm guessing we can actually kind of use similar to an agent style, where we send out a spy into an enemy settlement, and we can actually harass or damage their garrison or damage their building with sabotage infrastructure. And the first tier here, it's very similar. The only difference is you don't get plus 10 points of diplomatic relationship, you get 100% trade influence instead, and here you get the plus 10. The other two bonuses are exactly the same. You get access to non-aggression packs and military access. Okay, not exactly the same. Here you can trade territories, here you can have regular payments. So one's a more tribute focus, one's trading territory. So take that back. Not exactly the same, but in essence, you can gain trade agreements, non-aggression packs, and military access, whichever one you pick. And some of the other bonuses that you can pick up from these reforms are, Silken Spice, which is very useful because there's now actually 4 spice on the map. There's an extra spice on the map. There's 2 in the Nanman lands, and there's still 2 in the Gel province. And we get some trade agreements, character salaries. So it tends to be administrators are cave lords. So 2 more of those. 1 extra assignment, research rate 10%, very helpful given how long research rate take, 20%. So these are stuff you should keep your eye out for. diplomatic relationship, extra commerce. Commerce is also going to be key. We're going to see that in the building guide tomorrow. And then finally, some anti-corruption measures, which is not a big worry for the Nanman factions. There's 2 copper mines within your region, and a lot of your buildings reduces corruption. So if we take a quick peek, we're peeking a lot about buildings, but some of these are quite interesting. I might be on the wrong side because I haven't got used to which side has which. So you see this building here, tier 4, this is a tier 5, minus 25% corruption. That's pretty big. And considering we said earlier, your final build for your tall commander is the one with really, really good counties, because counties, once again, like bandits, it's going to factor in a lot for these Nanman factions. Builds are going to be very similar for these settlements. If you're building tall, you have to get 1 of each tier 5. It just makes sense that way. And here we have the Taoist confluence. This gives minus 25% corruption reduction in local. And then there's other buildings that give adjacent 15%. So corruption is not going to be an issue for the Nanman factions. I just don't see it. So that pretty much wraps up our guide on the reforms. Or this shouldn't be a guide. This is an overview. We'll have detailed guides breaking down each section and have some, actual strategy involved. Once we get our hand on playing the final build and getting access to that, will be post-launch. But I hope you guys have a pretty simple idea of how the game is designed and which faction focus on which. And once again, Mulu focuses on economy, which allow you to grab some key tier 3 buildings early on. Because you got to imagine that if you're playing as Shamo Ke or Lady Zhurong, you're stopped here. You get your level 3 farming building, everything else is maxed to 2 before you confederate or unite everyone. You have no access to high tier buildings whatsoever. There's going to be a very focused military approach to these campaigns early on. You got to unite the tribes, or else you are missing out on huge chunks of your reform potential. And you don't have to feel rushed. They did make these reforms really hard to unlock by giving them a lot of turns. So you're not actually going to run out of things to do. You're not going to finish all your reforms and you still haven't beat all the factions. I mean, if you go really slowly, perhaps that can happen, but usually not the case. So that's kind of where we stand on these reforms. Let me know how you guys think, and we'll take a look at all the buildings and see some of the building options we have for the Nanman factions and the Nanman land. I'll also run through what's included in the Nanman land. There's a total of 21 counties for that overview. So hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!